Today I am going to solve activity 8.10 in which you need to enter two numbers. You need to enter the first number in the variable named number 1, and then in number 2 you need to input the second number from the user. Then you need to compare these numbers. If first of all you have to tell if both make a comparison if both numbers are not equal. Then you have to tell which of these numbers is the largest. Then you need to tell which of these numbers is the smallest, and then you have to tell if both numbers are equal. Then you need to input one more number from the user, which should be saved in number 3. Then you need to check if all three numbers are not equal. Then you need to tell which of these three given numbers is the smallest, and then you have to check if all the three numbers input by the users are equal. I have already solved this activity. Let's take a look at the solution. This is the solution to this problem. I have, as you can see, that I have input the first number, which will be in integer form, and I have given a message to the user on screen that please enter the first number. \n is used to take the cursor to the next line. This message is printed on the screen. Please enter the first number, and the user has entered the first number 10. Same is the case with the second number. I have saved number 2 in a variable named number 2, which will be in integer form. I have input a message on the screen for the user to enter the second number, and the user has entered 15 as the second number. Now comes the first comparison. In first comparison, we have checked if number 1 is not equal to number 2. It will be printed on the screen that number 1 is not equal to number 2. Then you can see that this is printed on the screen because number 1 is 10 and number 2 is 15, so they are not equal. Then comes the next comparison. If number 1 is greater than number 2, it should be printed on the screen that number 1 is greater than number 2. You can see it that number 1 is 10 and number 2 is 15, and number 1 is smaller, not greater. So nothing is printed on the screen. Then comes the next comparison. If number 1 is less than number 2, you can see that number 1 is less than number 2 because 10 is smaller than 15. So it is printed on the screen that number 1 is less than number 2. Then comes the next comparison. If number 1 is equal to number 2, as you can see that 10 and 15 are not equal, so nothing is printed on the screen. Then comes the next input, that we have entered the third number 3. It is shown on the screen that please enter the third number, and I have entered 20 as the third number. Now comes the next comparison. We are comparing over here that if number 1 is not equal to number 2, and is connecting the next statement that if number 2 is also not equal to number 3. Then if all three numbers are not equal, what will be printed on the screen? All three numbers are not equal, and you can see that all three numbers are not equal. Why? Because 10 is not equal to 15, which is not equal to 20. Then comes the next comparison. If number 1 is less than number 2 and number 1 is also less than number 3, then it means number 1 is the smallest number. This is what I have printed over here. Number 1 is the smallest. Else, for the first else in Python we use elif. What is the second condition using that I have given using elif? That if number 2 is less than number 1, then it is also less than number 3. Then we will write it on the screen that number 2 is the smallest number. You can see that. Then we will write that number 2 is the smallest number. And for the last else, this was the first condition. This if was the first condition. This elif was the second condition. And for the last condition, we use else in Python with a colon. So if number one will not be smallest, if number two will not be smallest, then uh, of course number 3 will be the smallest number. And as you can see it from here, that out of 10, 15 and 20, 10 is the smallest number. It means number 1 is the smallest number. You can see it from here that number 1 is the smallest number, and so it is written over here that number 1 is the smallest number. Now comes the last comparison, that if all three numbers are equal, then it should be printed on screen that all three numbers are equal. You can see nothing is printed on the screen because all three numbers are not equal. 10 is not equal to 15, which is not equal to 20. So this was activity 8.10. Thank you.